Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dark Matter as well as the latest episode of Wynonna Earp. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Dark Matter, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Wynonna Earp. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Dark Matter. And a lot of things that went down this episode that we have to break down. There's a whole dream sequence thing that 3 had going on this episode about those things, which kind of got my mind thinking all over the place of because at first I was like, okay, so because eventually they end up going to that planet and everything, because obviously he's super freaked about it. He's like, I'm not going anywhere. And I thought it was kind of interesting that the android brought it up. So she's like, that's kind of interesting. I've never seen you afraid. The fact of the matter is, you don't want to do something. Usually you act out of like an immature child or get angry, but never fear. And she's like, I didn't want to call you out in front of the others, but it's you could actually tell. And he starts saying some things that even the android's kind of like, whoa, you act like you were okay after everything you said last episode about being okay with androids and Victor, how he's like, oh, how can we really trust what Victor gave to you? Which, to be fair, we know it's kind of that's kind of true, but at the same time, it's you said all this stuff, but it's I think it's just he was just kind of agitated because of this whole situation. But it's what went through my mind is we do know that their original selves, well, never mind. I forgot. I was about to say it's why wouldn't he remember? Wouldn't he remember that because they went there before? It's I forgot. This is before they had their memories wiped, so they didn't have the chance to really go investigate like they want to. I mean, at least I assume, because I think that was the same conversation. I think when she was talking to 4 last episode, that was also the same conversation of oh yeah, we need to take care of 6. So never mind. That kind of answers my own question there. But I love the reveal because I was okay, so obviously the preview shows that this has something to do with the thing that was in 3. That was back in season 1, so it's kind of interesting that it would affect him now, but it's the closer he got to this thing, the more it rattled him. And it turns out that these things are interdimensional beings who've basically devoured up their own universe, and they want to come to our universe to kind of eat it up. It's your universe will last us 1 billion years or something like that. It's wow. Didn't expect that. It's oh, we're dealing with an alien invasion, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because it's there's so much already happening. There's kind of this whole android revolution that's kind of starting right now with Irina and Victor, and Sarah's possibly being involved in it now. And then you've also got this whole corporate war going on. And now you're telling me on top of that we got to deal with aliens invading? That's crazy. It's no matter where you go in this series, you kind of basically you're fucked on every corner, on every side. So that's crazy to me. But obviously, we got a little more deeper look at apparently these creatures have I thought it was something maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but it didn't really seem like Rook it seemed like he made this thing, but apparently not. Maybe it seems like it's actually a thing all on its own. It's a being that, in fact, they're the ones who actually got Rook to be as smart as he is. I mean, not smart, as rich as he is. They supplied him with a lot of technology from their own world so he could implement in this world. And the whole, people too, who are nanobot, well, the term they use in this episode is simulates, kind of simulated humans. Basically built a whole army of them. It's because it's oh yeah, Portia had, the memory had talked about stopping an invasion or something like that, and it's oh wow, so they're talking about the invasion of these? Or it's just no, they're talking about the invasion of the alien things from another dimension, which technically count for the simulates, because apparently they were created to be the bodies that the dimensional creatures could inhabit. They're all ranging from young kids, all the way to old people, because they're meant to infiltrate every aspect of life. Just so it's a lot easier to conquer things, because you rise through the ranks, because there was the actress who played Lucado in Wynonna Earp. She popped up in this episode, and she ended up being one of them. Because at first, before it kind of got revealed that these things are from another dimension, I was oh man, Rook must have gotten to her and implanted one of those things, and it was nope, she got possessed because she is a simulant. But it's they do such a good job. They have all these fake backgrounds. They do extensive work, all these backgrounds of oh, this, and that, how they got to the positions that are been, because it seemed like none of them had been activated, but there are some that had been activated for months. Rook has disappeared, which now kind of makes sense why Rook has disappeared because of this whole thing of like, he knows what was coming, which also begs the question, what about that old dude that Rook was talking to, the guy that wanted Rebecca? So it's like, is it because of this whole situation? Like, maybe his whole circumstance is that maybe he got possessed by one, because it's like they said like a human body can't handle it, because at first they're like, oh, 3 could be useful, granted he doesn't have nanites, so his body would give out. So it's like maybe that's an example of what happens when they possess a regular human, that the body will eventually, like, maybe they'll rapidly age, or maybe it's the fact of the matter is that I don't know if that's really come up about whether nanites, like whether or not Portia would actually age or not. I mean I don't know, like, they're not necessarily humans, they're synthetic humans, so maybe it's a situation of like they wouldn't age, and maybe that's what they also mean, because it's like, oh, maybe it's not even just like oh, your body wouldn't be able to handle us, it's because like your body would die eventually. We need bodies that would go on and on and on and on and constantly heal, so we'd never have to worry about being hurt too and stuff like that. So I don't know, because this episode also brought up the whole fact of the matter is of like, kind of like, I guess very similar to the whole android situation of like, where do simulants fall into the category of like, oh, they're not human, so they're not living, so they don't really have rights. I mean, much like androids, but the fact of the matter is they have free will and everything, and they're kind of like humans. But you know, those Mickey people had showed up, and like that dude had treated one of them like crap, basically tapping a device into his spinal cord, I mean his nervous system is what I meant, and basically being able to make it feel like the sensation of pain happening to you. Like, it's not happening, but he can make you feel the sensation of having your finger severed or your eye being stabbed. So, but now that I'm thinking about it, like, Irina was part of the main project that made Rebecca, because Rebecca was the essentially the prototype to this whole thing. So it begs the question, does Irina know about these other dimensional things? Could that be what she's doing, trying to get all the androids powered up? Like, is she trying to work with the androids? Is she trying to stop the situation without letting others know? Like, once again, like, maybe she doesn't know, because I don't know. Like, it seems like that was the main purpose of the nanite people. People like too, like they were made for that purpose. So it's like maybe Irina never knew. Maybe she always thought it was kind of supposed to be implemented in a different way. But maybe the truth, Rook kept the truth from everybody. Maybe only some people. Maybe even Rook wasn't the top of it. Maybe that old man is, or maybe there's someone above him, or maybe there's a group of people involved in this whole situation. Have no idea. Just kind of interesting that this whole thing has also turned into an alien invasion. Partially, I mean, granted, the planet gets blown up later on. It kind of sucks that that Mickey dude called the order and then killed himself. But then I'm like, from the storytelling perspective, like, I get why he did it, because it's like, if he's dead, none of the others could force him to stop all of this. So to kind of destroy the portal. But I mean, the thing is, can these things be wiped out? Like, the Raza dealt with it by like spacing it and it froze. But even then, is it dead? Put it in the No, they froze it to kind of get it out of 3. But they did space it, right? God, I don't remember. I think they did. I think they froze it to get it out of 3's body, and then like they spaced it. Whatever the case may be, is it dead? I don't know. So, but the thing is, would a nuclear explosion be enough to wipe them out or not? I mean, even if the human bodies get wiped out, wouldn't they be able to just switch bodies? And also, what about the simulants? Aren't they able to just, their bodies can adapt to new conditions? So that's what they're meant to do. So isn't it possible that they survived? Because it's not like it destroyed the entire planet. It's like it destroyed that facility, but they could have easily like guarded themselves. I mean, depending on how advanced these simulants are, because maybe they have the next generation of nanites in them like 2 does. But maybe a powerful enough explosion is enough to wipe them out. I don't know. Maybe that gate's closed forever. Maybe not. Or maybe it's a situation of that's only one of many gates. Because it does seem like this whole 3 situation is that he is connected to them. So, which also begs the question, because I keep wondering, what is it about 3? Because we still have not gotten the answer. What is it about 3? Why was 4 avoiding him? Why does it seem like Sarah knows something about why they're avoiding him? Because I kept thinking like it has to be about this situation, but it's like no, because their memories got got wiped before they could even go to this place, right? Or did I completely misinterpret that? Because I feel like that would have come up before. Like 4 would have mentioned that if he knew about this whole situation. Granted, they were talking about an invasion. So they were talking about invasion. Were they talking about this, or were they talking about the stimulants? The simulants? I don't know. I'm confusing myself on what that meant. I feel like that could go either way. Maybe it is them talking about the fact that they're like, oh, these simulants. Or maybe it's like, or maybe they are talking about this. But once again, why wouldn't Ford mention it? Not unless Ford felt like it's beneficial to him not to say anything. Not unless this could be a situation of like eventually leading to them being kind of I have no idea. And maybe that's why he avoided 3, because he knows about he knows about those things from another dimension and what that meant for 3. Maybe that's what happened. Because I feel like it has to be connected. Like, I don't know. Because this is the only other, like, big thing that stands out for 3, like, storytelling-wise, is this being a thing, and 4 avoiding him. Those are, like, the 2 key mysteries about him right now. So I'm curious to see how long this whole, like, thing will go. Like, is it something a lot deeper than we realize, or is it just a surfacing of, like, the thing was possessing him at one point, maybe some residual bits of it still exist? I mean, 3 is the only one they talked to. Granted, they might be on some telepathic link because of the thing being inside of him, so I'm guessing I guess he might be their detector from now on, being able to tell, like, these are those things from another dimension. So, at the end of the episode, we do see that 2 did get taken by what appears to be Marcus from the other dimension, which is kind of interesting to me. It's like, why would you want 2? I would assume it has to have something to do with this whole. Is he bringing her to Rook? Like, what is it? Like, because obviously, once again, the whole timelines work a little differently in the other universe. But then it's like, do they know about the alien invasion dimensional things? But then again, these things are from another dimension, just like that's another dimension. So would that even cross over? Could that be the plan, to send these things to another dimension so it's not our dimension that gets attacked, but eventually they work their way back around to this dimension? I don't know. Or do dimensions because it counts as a alternate dimension, but really more so than anything, when you break it down, it's an alternate timeline, essentially, where things worked out differently. So, but I guess that still can apply to being a dimension. Like, these things seem more like it's from a different dimension. I don't know. It's confusing, and I'm making my head hurt thinking about it. It's just like, I don't know. It's a crazy situation, and I just don't know which way things are going to sway. Android, because the android, her and 2 had this interesting conversation in this episode about her being like, embracing the fact that she has free will. She's changed her clothes and everything. She's saying boobs a lot. Boobs. And then 2 being like, could you stop saying that? What? Boobs? It's like, what? The fact, it makes you wonder too, is 2 a little awkward around the android now because of finding out about the android being based on Irina, and the fact is that her and Irina had a thing. Like, does that mess with her in some shape or form? I don't know. And she's thinking too, because she's like, oh, thank you for being like a good friend for longer than any one of us will be able to remember. So it's like, huh. And also another interesting thing came up in this episode. 2 referenced the fact is like, oh, this must be one of those, I forgot what she says specifically, but it's like, oh, this must be that event that 5 in the future talked to the android. But I was like, wait, what? Wait, so the android did remember? I thought the whole thing was like 5 didn't want the timeline to possibly change, so I thought she wiped the android's memory, because it never came up in conversation. So not unless it's a situation of like, she was like, I can't tell you anymore because I don't want to take the chance you might change the timeline, and left it at that. So the android left with a little bit of future time knowledge that she knew. So which means they know about the whole fall of Ashita, right? Which is so interesting. I did not know that they knew about the future events like that, which is kind of, like I said, they don't talk about it. That's what kind of catches me off guard. So it's like, huh. I was so certain that the android didn't remember that for whatever reason. Like I said, I thought like 5 wiped their memories. It's like, nope. Overall, a very good episode, but I feel like I'm misinterpreting a lot of things that came up in the episode. I don't know. We'll just kind of have to wait and see, whether I'm just purely overthinking things or whether I just misinterpret things. It's definitely going to be interesting going forward to see like what ends up happening with this whole crazy situation. And now moving on to this week's episode of Wynonna Earp, a pretty intense episode with a lot of stuff that went down. So much to go over. Okay, so first of all, we have Nicole being bit by the widow Mercedes, and that ended up, poisoning her, much like it did Juan Carlo. Immediately, my brain didn't immediately jump to that. I was like, oh man, I wonder what's going to happen to Nicole. It's like, oh man, everyone's panicking. It's like, oh man, is she going? I was like, oh, what's it going to do? I completely forgot. Literally, wasn't that? That was like 2 episodes ago, the whole Juan Carlo thing happening, but it still slipped my mind. They even kind of referenced it at the beginning, but it still didn't click in my head because you had Dolls putting him down. I was like, right. It wasn't until Dolls and them really start talking about it. I was like, right. Juan Carlo got poisoned. That's right. I'm an idiot. And now it puts Waverly in a position where she's like, okay, I'm going to have to. Beth comes to her, is like, hey, you find me the 3rd seal, I can cure your girlfriend. And just want, like, because Waverly's dealing with that on top of the fact of the matter, she finds out, like, wait, you know where the 3rd seal is? Wynonna, but you haven't told me? Like, you don't trust me? It's like, she's like, I'm not telling anybody where it is. I didn't realize that Dolls didn't know where it is either. I thought she informed Dolls that the ring was, well, he probably knows what it is, probably just didn't know where it was. No one did. The only person that knew where it was Wynonna, which I thought was kind of interesting that the person she ended up relying it to is Nedley, because I guess, like, consider their past and everything. She's like, yeah, because I was wondering what she was kind of talking to him about earlier in the episode. It's like, so that's what that was about. It's like, oh, so she asked him to protect the ring and everything. And I love Nedley being a badass. Like, Mercedes is like slapping him around and stuff, and he's just like, she's like, oh, I can make this hurt a lot more. I can make this it'd be excruciating for like weeks or whatever. He's like, oh, that sounds very kinky. Are you sure you're not the real Mercedes? And then he's like, what are you, a witch? Are you a Pokemon? It's like, you're such a smart mouth, and I love it. I feel like we never but I feel like that's just a side of Neatly we don't really get to see. I guess you see it a little bit, but it's just not to that extent. And it's like, dude, major props to you. But it's like, okay, because at first I thought he was just doing that just to be a stern old dude, but it's like, no, he was doing that for a reason, because he didn't want to let slip he knew where the ring was. It's kind of interesting where he ended up hiding the ring anyway. It's like it was literally just in his cup. But nevertheless, it is kind of interesting seeing Waverly kind of put in that position of like, okay, what do I do? The woman I love, we're in a fight and everything. I don't want her dying thinking like I hate her. We're in the middle of this fight. She ends up letting it slip about Rosita. Both that the fact is that they made out because I cheated on her with Rosita. And then it's like, oh yeah, and Rosita's a Revenant and everything, which is like, I thought you made a promise to Rosita that you weren't going to say anything, because it's like, if saying something to Rosita would also mean outing yourself and everything, which is so shitty. Once again, she's under stress, so I guess at the time she didn't really think it mattered. I mean, Wynonna kind of looked at Dolls, and Dolls was like, not now, about dealing with that whole situation. But it sucks that it kind of came out like that, because now it puts everything in this awkward situation. Because Wynonna treated Rosita like shit. She's like, I personally, I kind of like you now, but the fact of the matter is you're a Revenant. So it's like, help me out with my sister. And if you do, you help out with this whole situation with Nicole, maybe I'll shoot you last. It's just kind of like, it's just sad that she kind of treats her like that and it's forcing her hand. It's like, I guess for her too, it's because it's like, this is my family's life that's on the line. Because it's like, not only is it Nicole's life that's on the line, so we need to do whatever it needs to be taken, but the fact of the matter is you're a Revenant's whole curse and everything. I need to put all of you down anyway for the sake of this curse. So for her, it's like everyone knew but her, so she's pissed off about that too, especially for Doc, which Doc is just kind of like, well, why you think I just chose not to tell you? Because I knew how awkward it would be telling you that, oh yeah, the woman I'm kind of with right now is a Revenant. So, but kind of using her as a guinea pig, which I appreciate. The fact is that Jeremy was like super against. He's like, no, Rosita, you don't have to do this. Like, doesn't matter if you're Revenant, whatever the case may be, don't do this. And even he was talking to Wynonna like, hey, we're going to talk about this later. I was like, oh wow. Like, because it's like, just because she's a Revenant doesn't mean you get to kind of push her around and treat her like anything less. Because Rosita is helped out. Like, because to him, he's always been like, no, she's part of the team and everything. But Wynonna's kind of like, no, whatever. It's like, yeah, once again, Wynonna's like, I kind of like you, but it doesn't take away from the fact is that you are a Revenant. But once again, not all Revenants are bad. We kind of learned from Rosita, like, hey, like, she was just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time type of situation. Got along with one of the people on Wyatt's list. Granted, we don't know. Maybe she's kind of in the past when it comes to heirs that she's one. Maybe she's killed a few heirs under her own belt. Maybe seems like she kind of sticks away from the whole situation. I don't know. I still think it just kind of, it sucks because, I don't like Rosita. I mean, most people do. So once again, it's kind of Waverly's fault for kind of spilling it once again, considering the circumstances. We ended up also finding out that, interestingly enough, Shay popping up like that. I wasn't expecting that twist. I should have figured as much when Nedley was kind of like, couldn't get in contact with her parents because apparently Nicole's not in good terms with her parents. But we did find out that her and Shay are married. And I think that also put Waverly in a very interesting spot. Well, I mean, not interesting storytelling wise, obviously personal level, you're kind of like, oh, that sucks. Is it affecting matter? It's like, oh, this is the person that you care about, you love, and you see them like they're dying, and now you're finding out that person's married. On top of that, you also cheated on her in your eyes because you kissed her. I mean, to be kissed Rosita, but to be fair, all you did was kiss her. But still, that's a betrayal. That's cheating in its own right. I think a kiss is a lot more forgivable than sex. You know, like it's that you made a mistake. Yes, that's going to lead to a long conversation about trust and everything. But I think that's a lot more excusable than sex or anything. I mean, it's not like they hardcore made out either. It's like it was like a what 2 or 3 second kiss at most. So, but nevertheless, plus on top of that, like there was a whole conversation. Oh, what is Nicole allergic to? It's like, oh, and Waver's like nothing, but then her like Shay's like, oh no, she's allergic to this. It's like, oh, wow, and it made her feel like, for one, it made her feel useless. She's dying, and there's nothing she can do about it. And if she's here in the way because she's not making anything better, she's not actually being helpful. And it's like, oh, apparently you know more about Nicole than I did. I mean, granted, it was kind of like a Las Vegas thing of like, oh, we got drunk and got married type of thing. So she even says it to Waverly later on of like, hey, you know, me and Nicole, we had our fun and everything. I guess it's still like because maybe they haven't had a chance to dissolve the marriage, or maybe it's just a situation of her like still being in like her emergency contact and everything. Who knows how long ago that was? I mean, to be fair, like time and everything, like maybe that was like just before Nicole got to purgatory, whatever the case may be. I think all of that stacked on top of each other, plus the fact is Rosita kind of using herself as an experiment, even Doll's doing it to help Waverly out to do whatever she needs to. It's like what he's willing to do whatever it takes because, you know, it's like you do whatever it takes for the people you love. And it's like, yo, Nicole is on our team. She's someone that we care about, but more so than anything, she's someone that you love and care about, which makes her important, even more so important to me, you know? So he ends up taking it upon himself to kind of test out the, possible cure that they're trying to work on. But then you had that whole situation with Waverly making a deal with the Iron Witch, her name's Greta. She's Maddie's twin sister. What she said she didn't have a twin sister. I guess that was her just kind of covering her tracks because it's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, whatever the case may be. She makes a deal with Waverly. Oh, I help you get the cure, but you need to give me something. You have to give me whatever I want. And then Waver's like, sure, I'll give you anything. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You don't make agreements like that. Those are shitty agreements. And because you were basically giving that person access to take whatever they want. They can change the terms however they want to. It wasn't until later on in the episode, my brain immediately, before we got revealed what it actually was, my brain was like, oh, could it actually be Wynonna's baby that she ends up taking? Could that be what that's all about? Because also at the same time, Ewing was like, hey, we can raise the next heir. And even like Dawes was like, why the hell are you so interested in the Earps now? You didn't give a shit about them before. Now you want to. It's like, well, that baby's going to be tracked down by different people. You know, demons and monsters are obviously going to be attracted to the baby because, you know, it's the next Earp. And then, like, you also have, like, he's like, oh, but there's also cults like Black Badge. And he's like, well, and then you have, like, you know, Dolls kind of being like, Black Badge is, you know, yes, they have their problems and everything, they're misguided, but the fact of the matter is they're a government organization that, you know, they wouldn't do something like that, like kidnap a baby, which immediately my brain goes, they would, wouldn't they? Because of the fact of the matter is, it does seem like it isn't just a government-funded organization. It seems like some old-school organization of like, this is maybe tied into some like deep-seated like medieval magic type of thing, or like this organization's been around a long time type of thing. So I mean, we still don't really know that much about Black Badge, which is kind of interesting because Ewing even said it himself. He's like, well, didn't you get kidnapped by Black Badge? So it's like, so was Dolls, because I always thought was like Dolls joined Black Badge, like obviously as an adult or something like that, you know, like he got upgraded to them, but has he always been under their employ? Much like, I forgot her name, is Eliza, she's played by the actress who played Tamsin on Lost Girl. Her, like, were they, because my understanding was like they went on a military op or something like that, and something happened to it. I thought something possessed them, but it seems like Black Badge is the one that made them what they are, which is like, or at least some military group did. But it seems like it was Black Badge, which then again, it's like, why would you work with a group that made you the way you are? Then again, they made the medicine for you to kind of help you quell it. So I don't know. Maybe in his mind, it was also like, hey, as long as it gives me the strength to protect the people that I care about as well as my country, then I'll do whatever it takes. You know, he's a loyal soldier to the cause, you know, type of thing. So maybe that's what that is about. I don't know. That'd definitely be kind of interesting if it is the case of like, oh yeah, dolls, weren't you taken as a baby? But turns out Wynonna's baby, getting back to the point I was trying to make, isn't, the price, which still kind of puts Ewing and his group in the running for like taking care of the baby. Once again, we still don't know what Wynonna plans to do with the baby. Like, is she planning to keep the baby around? I mean, considering their life, all the trouble that kind of finds their way, it might be best for the baby to grow up not quote unquote being an Earp, but it might turn into a situation of like the baby comes back and it's like, oh, you weren't there for me in my life, when the child gets older. So I don't know. But sadly, Waverly did hand over the ring to Beth, even though Wynonna they did capture Mercedes and ended up getting the cure, which upsets Wynonna heavily because it's like, I told you, you had my word, but you didn't. That wasn't enough. You couldn't just believe in me, And she kind of gets pissed at Dolls too because it's like you've handed like this weapon into like their hands to kind of raise Clooney, which also, let's not forget, your plan was to raise him anyway, but it's still a situation of like, she made a deal with Dolls, or to Doc, that they'll handle it in their own way. They'll wait till after the baby's born, and that way, the moment they're ready, locked and loaded, it would be on their terms essentially, but now it's like they're caught off guard, and now she has a head start to get Clooney resurrected. Make it like, I think if in their mind it's like, okay, we're right here, you ready? Resurrect him, shoot him, put him down, type of thing. I think that's how Wynonna's mind has kind of been about that. So, which once again, like I brought this up last episode, what would happen to the other revenants if Clooney was put down first? Like, would they be permanently sent to hell? Would any that weren't already sent to hell be sent back to hell? Someone like Rosita, for example. So would it be a situation of you would actually need to put her down if you took Clooney down because it would undo the curse and maybe turn everyone back to being human? Maybe not. But getting back to it, I like the twist of finding out, like, oh, what this all was for Greta was revenge. So she set this whole situation up. It's like, oh, yeah, like, giving her, Waverly the ring. It's like, oh, yeah, you thought I was good. It's like making a wish with a genie. You got to be very specific or you're going to get screwed over because of technicalities and loopholes and stuff like that. She gave her a loophole. It's like, you did get the cure and everything because you got the ring and was able to turn it over and got the cure. Not my fault that things didn't work out the way you wanted them to, so... I mean, I guess in some shape or form, I don't know if this scene was supposed to be fortuitous or not. Was that scene earlier on in the bar when Doc is playing against that dude Stevie and they're having that card game? Which I appreciate. The fact is that obviously he was like still pissed about the whole ring situation. But the moment Wynonna mentions like, yeah, Nicole's been bitten and she's dying, he's like, what? Hey, let's get right to it. He got right up. I thought that was kind of a pretty neat thing to show, like, hey, we got each other's back. So I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing. But it's that moment of like, hey, you tell me why you're so interested in staying around here for so long, and I'll let you get a bottle of whatever, if you win. And he flips the car over and he would have lost and everything, but if it wasn't for Wynonna showing up. So maybe that was kind of like that gamble. It's kind of, maybe it was foreshadowing to the gamble that Waverly kind of makes in this episode. But nevertheless, it seems like this is all revenge for like, oh, you got my sister killed, which is like, it wasn't even their fault. Like, the skull got passed on to Waverly, So, I mean, but I guess it's an Earp reason why this was there in the first place. It's not like they gave your sister the skull to look after personally. It got passed on to Waverly, and it's like, oh, you're blaming them. Why don't you blame the woman that actually killed your sister? But I guess whatever the case may be, that just kind of sucks that they're being punished for it. Doc ended up touching the statue while she's casting the spell. He was collateral damage. And so he's put in a well the place he doesn't want to be, like his worst nightmare, being trapped down there again. To make matters worse, though, he doesn't have his ring, so he's not immortal, so there's a possibility of dying. I mean, granted, I kind of think that might be some illusionary thing, but the fact of the matter is, it seems like it might also just be a real thing, considering the fact that she's like, he's collateral. But the real punishment is, one of the sisters has to disappear. In this case, it seems like it's Wynonna. She disappears while the other one lives on, kind of basically. I thought it was going to be live on knowing what they did, that it's like basically that Waverly live on knowing it's her fault that her sister disappeared. You took my sister away from me, so I'm going to take your sister away from you, type of thing. But then you had this moment, like, at first it seems like everything changes, and even Dolls is like, oh, what am I doing here? Whatever. And he goes back to sitting at his desk, and then it's kind of like, wait, what? And then you have Jeremy walking in, and then Waverly's kind of like, oh, wait, what did I say the name Wynonna? What does that mean? And it's like, oh, we're getting married. So it's like, okay. Because at first I was like, is it going to be a situation where everyone forgets except for Waverly? I thought that was kind of the whole point, but it's like, no, even Waverly, like, forgot. So none of it's like, I guess for them, it's like if Wynonna never existed in their lives. Granted, so it's gonna be like some weird like alternate reality stuff. I'm curious to see like how that's implemented, and also like where exactly Wynonna is in this like empty space of things of like non-existing and stuff like that, and how will she undo it and everything. Also, while Cootie is being born, which is interesting that Greta would pick this particular time. Does she not think she's not gonna be infected? Once again, Constance killed your sister. You would think you'd kind of want to give the middle finger to her sister wives, which I didn't realize that it wasn't. They're like, oh, we're sister wives because not because we're actually related. We're not actual sisters. We're just sister wives because we're all married to the same person. It's like, that makes sense. Nevertheless, also, what the hell is up with the plate? Because you did have Wynonna at the last second figuring out. She's like, oh, I think I figured it, and disappeared. Which apparently that's going to be the weapon needed to fight the widow situation, which we ended up finding out what they are. They're spider widows, which kind of makes sense. Widow spiders, kind of trapping you like with that cold breath and then kind of wrapping you up, being venomous and biting like that. It's like, that kind of makes sense when you think about it in retrospect. Plus, like, there's well, nevertheless, it's not important. Like I said, a very intense episode. I mean, a lot of stuff going down, but especially that ending. So I'm very curious to see what goes on in the next episode. Or how do you handle a situation like this? How do you fix something like this when no one knows what's going on? And what other changes are there to Purgatory and to everyone's personal lives? As we can see, Jeremy and Waverly are getting married. So it's like, what does that mean for Nicole, as well as the dynamics of everyone else? But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.